But I want to talk next about a topic that has something to do with the storm, but hasn't quite factored in with the data yet. So the National Association of Realtors released a migration trends report showing consumer motivations for relocating and which states are gaining the most residents. In the past, historically, in my 20 years in this business, the majority of my career, if someone was moving to a new area and not retiring, then it was because of a job. And so more and more home buyers would buy in our market or move. And obviously we have a large military presence as well. And the purpose was because they were coming for a new job. However, that is not the top reason people are moving anymore. There is now people, especially with, the more at-home work opportunities, the more people that have become entrepreneurs, you're seeing people move to areas because of either their more affordable housing, lower taxes, strong job markets, politics, COVID policies even caused some of this migration. So in the last year prior to, so this is not factoring in the storms yet, the 20 states with the largest net migration, Florida is number one. Florida with 372,000 new residents. And obviously we know that that is a, substantial number of that is in Tampa Bay. Then Texas with 315, North Carolina with 126, South Carolina with 91, Georgia with 88,000, Tennessee 76,000. So the top 6 states are all kind of mid-south, with Texas being still kind of south, but all southern conservative kind of labeled areas now that have drawn the, nearly 1 million people in population have migrated to those states in the last year. So obviously, if you pile up the last few years, we're talking millions of new residents in our state. Now, that is what has fueled our real estate market. If you look at Florida and Tampa Bay real estate statistics and compare them to national averages for the last several years, we are outpacing those areas. And the reason we're outpacing those areas is twofold. Number one is our population is growing. And number two is our production of new housing isn't. Okay, so whether that's our cities and municipalities with slow permitting processes or builders just still feeling the sting of foreclosure crisis from back in the day, or the storms, or a whole variety of reasons, new construction development isn't keeping up with the demand of current living in Florida home buyers, as well as the home buyers that are moving here. So what does that mean? That means our prices have outpaced, either in appreciation or stabilization, other parts of the country. Now, so case in point, if you understand that Florida can only produce so many new housing units, and the local demand of people already living here would buy up that inventory without even outsiders coming in. You put outsiders on top of it, what does it cause? It causes our market to outperform national averages. It causes our market's prices to do better. Now, that doesn't mean we're in a constant state of appreciation. We've had a year or two where prices have kind of stabilized and not really grown that much. But we had such a long run up where prices were just perpetually rising. And it was because of a lot of those things. Now, interest rates have obviously slowed some of that price growth, but interest rates aren't just impacting Florida, it's impacting everywhere. So everywhere has kind of seen that stabilization of pricing because interest rates zapping that demand. Now, what remains to be seen, and what we don't know for sure, is whether that migration continues post Helene and Milton. I've had people ask me like, hey, what's going on with home sales? Well, September and October were historically bad, and they were historically bad because of the storms. But now, will we see a drop in people moving here because of the PR and the news and the catastrophe that happened from both of those storms? Same thing with North and South Carolina. Will they see some drop in their net migration as people decide maybe to leave? So there's no way to know that. It's too soon to know that yet. November statistics aren't out yet. November obviously would have been the first non-storm impacted month. It'll be interesting to see how we fare. The holidays are typically not a big time for buyers and sellers to be out transacting. They're typically, for the most part, if someone isn't under contract already, they're likely looking to close next year. Closing by this point, a few weeks left in the year, would be problematic. Not impossible, but just not likely, and we're not likely to see a huge wave of that. So ultimately, most of the demand that comes back post-storms, if it hasn't happened and closed in November, we're probably looking at it showing up next year. So we know we have a Fed rate cut. It's likely, not guaranteed, but likely later this month. Obviously, a new presidential administration coming in January. So a lot of people are optimistic that 2025 will be a better real estate year. I think that it will. A lot will depend, though, on number one, how we fare during storm season. If we have months with bad storms, then obviously that kills that month in terms of sales. And then secondly, will our population growth continue to occur, or will we see more people leave because of the impact of the storms? The feedbacks that I'm seeing so far, the customers that I'm talking to, we're still getting people moving here, not as many, at least from my pulse and what I can tell with our website and talking to consumers, but we're seeing more people leave than we have in a long time. It's to be understood. If someone got impacted by the storm and they have the ability, or they just moved here and they're not used to dealing with it, and this is the first time they've had to experience it, then it's going to be more traumatic. Or if they had major financial loss, whatever it is, I think you're going to see people leave. I also think you're going to see some people in the storm affected areas. So an example, if you're not on the water, if you don't have the water view, but you're paying the premium because you're a few blocks away and you got major impacted, I think there's a lot of those people that are going to say, look, I'm not really on the water. I don't have the water view. Why am I paying all this insurance money for that when I don't really get the benefit of it, when I could get a better, nicer house maybe 20 or 30 miles outside of Tampa? I think you're going to see a migration from our waterfront areas to our suburbs for those specific people. I do think, however, you're also going to see the value in some of those flood-prone areas rise pretty considerably after a couple of years. Here's what I mean by that. What ends up happening, and I've talked to friends in other hurricane-affected markets. So you look at our beaches, you look at our South Tampa, Beach Park, Cold Breath Isles, Bayshore, Davis Island, Harbor Island. You look at some of these water-impacted areas, and here's what's going to end up happening. A lot of these one-story, single-story homes that were flooded, that FEMA either won't allow them to get rebuilt because of the 50% rule, meaning that the damage to the property exceeds 50% of the structure's value, not the land value, the structure's value, or you're going to see a lot of homes get built up, which is going to mean bigger homes in the neighborhood, even more new construction than was already happening, and that will raise values in those areas. Now, not in the short term. I mean, in the long term. If you drive through, some of the beaches in the Carolinas, if you go through some parts of Louisiana, you can see that almost everything now is built up in those areas. A lot of stilt homes, a lot of first-story garages, and consequently, what ends up happening when you do that is you have a more valuable, higher-priced real estate, and that will ultimately continue to pull the value up in that neighborhood. So long-term in some of those neighborhoods, if you're someone that's living in one of those neighborhoods and you don't have to move next week, because the short term is some of those neighborhoods are going to see some depreciation. You're going to have land values drop because there's going to be more people selling, and you're going to have builders that are going to be a little more predatory to look to get a better deal because the uncertainty of the future. The long-term prospects in those areas are actually really good because of those things. So short-term, not so great. Long-term, in a lot of the waterfront and beachfront areas, it's actually going to start to even pull the values up even more. And that just because the construction quality is now going to require stilt homes, bigger homes, more new construction protection features. So there's going to be a lot left to determine how 2025 fares for real estate. But one of the things that we're going to need to be paying attention to is our population growth. If our real estate market's going to continue to outpace others and get some of our value back and have values continue to rise, we're going to need to see that population growth continue. If it goes in the opposite direction, we could see some downward trends from that. Hopefully not. Fortunately, while there were a lot of people hurt by the storm, had catastrophe and so many obstacles, it isn't such an insurmountable number that our market can't recover from it. Friends of mine in Louisiana, Texas, and the Carolinas that live in and operate real estate companies in hurricane-impacted areas of the past have said it took about 6 months to a year for things to kind of really come back, and that they saw a downward trend for a while and then it kind of bounced back. Again, hoping that we don't have another record hurricane season. So hopefully that helps you guys understand what we're seeing in Tampa Bay. If you want to know what's going on with your house, if you want to see what your neighbors are selling for, if you want to see, hey, look, maybe there's a short sale or foreclosure coming in my neighborhood that might hurt my value. If you want to know all those things, go to DuncanDuo.com, type in your address. You can do it on your phone. It's a really quick, easy mobile. You pop in your address, your phone number, and all that. Again, at DuncanDuo.com.